Good afternoon, Senators. In the absence of the chaplain, please join me in the Lord's Prayer. Our Father,
who art in heaven, hallowed
Good afternoon, Senators. Welcome to the Senate session of the 31st of July, 2023. Adoption of the minutes.
No, we suspended it.
Oh, we
Second
suspended.
reading.
Okay. Further second readings and committal of bills. As many, the chair recognizes Senator the Honorable Ryan Pindell.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. I stand to move for the second reading of the Commercial Entities Substance Requirements Bill 2023. But before I do so, Mr. Vice President, I want to recognize a group of people and an individual. Tomorrow is August 1st. August 1st is a very important day for the fishermen of this country. August 1st is the opening of crawfish season, Mr. Vice President. Our number one grossing fisheries, component of our fisheries industry in the country. I personally want to rise to wish all of our fishermen of the country Godspeed in their journeys. Some go out for as many as 5 weeks at a time, away from their families, away from the safety of home, out on our waters. Many of my family are now at sea, heading out to provide for their families. And I just want to wish them all well. I want to wish the fishermen of our country well. It is an area that touches many of our family islands, more so than it might in Nassau. And it's a unique industry in that regard. So I want to wish all of them a safe trip, a prosperous trip. Let's pray for a high price and bountiful volume. The second recognition I want to give, Mr. Vice President, is Ms. Tanya McCartney, the outgoing president of the Bahamas Financial Services Board. Many might not know Ms. McCartney recently tendered her resignation, and the Bahamas Financial Services Board is looking for a new CEO. Tanya put a lot of hard work and years into the industry and the financial services industry. It's an industry that I come out of, Mr. Vice President. And so I want to recognize her hard work. I want to recognize the new branding of our jurisdiction as the clear choice. And I want to recognize her tireless efforts in advancing the jurisdiction in the face of countries and institutions that would like to get in our way. Ms. McCartney has done a yeoman's job, and I wish her well in the private sector on her new endeavors. And I look forward to the Bahamas Financial Services Board's recruitment exercise. It's always rather thorough, and the candidates are always rather progressive. Just so happens that these candidates have all been women. Maybe this time, we have a man lead the Bahamas Financial Services Board. My colleagues don't think that that's the case. Anyway, if colleagues would recognize Ms. Tanya McCartney for me with me. Thank you. Former senator, yes, former senator. Well, yeah. As I said, today I rise to move for the second reading of the Commercial Entities Substance Requirements Bill 2023. This bill repeals and replaces the Commercial Entities Substance Requirements Act of 2018. This bill is a comprehensive approach and is intended to bring our economic substance regime into compliance with international best practices as framed by the OECD. Allow me to give a little history on the origins of this bill, as well as where we find ourselves today as a country. And then I will highlight then some elements of the bill and then highlight the revisions that we are making in this bill as compared to the act that's being repealed. The Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, we call it the OECD, their inclusive framework in follow-up work related to BEPS Action 5, that's the base erosion profit sharing. It's a regime putting forward by the OECD to ensure that revenues are taxed in the jurisdiction in which the activities generating those revenues are. BEPS Action 5 released a new global standard that applies to no or nominal tax jurisdictions, such as the Bahamas, Mr. Vice President, and that requires substantial activities in order for that tax regime not to be considered a harmful tax practice. This global standard means that mobile business income cannot be parked in a zero tax jurisdiction without the core business functions that generate that income having been undertaken by the same business entity in the same location. In doing so, the inclusive framework ensures that substantial activities must be performed in respect of the same types of mobile business activities, regardless of whether they take place in a preferential regime or in a no or only nominal tax regime. This will require a reporting framework where such reporting verifies that in designated industries that they have substantial economic presence in the country of incorporation. This includes factors such as employees, physical presence, the mind and management, or otherwise what is known as in the industry as core income generating activities must be conducted in that jurisdiction. The Commercial Entities Substance Requirement Act was entered into force in the Bahamas with effect from the 1st of January 2019 for the implementation of our commitments under BEPS Action 5. CESRA, as we call the bill, requires commercial entities engaged in certain relevant activities to have economic substance in the Bahamas. The Bahamas was tasked at that time with effectively implementing the requirements for economic substance. A portal was created and reporting was initiated. The European Union, our best friends, through its Code of Conduct Group, performs annual monitoring of the effective implementation of substance requirements under the EU list, what's called Criterion 2.2. So that's the framework in the EU criterion called Criterion 2.2 that applies to economic substance. Shortly after the general election, the government received notice of certain deficiencies related to the implementation of CESRA and the economic substance reporting that were found in their annual monitorings of 2019 and 2020. Of course, we would know that 2019 is the year Dorian hit, and 2020 is the year COVID hit. And it would be perfectly understandable and realistic to assume that the year that you implemented, or the year after you implemented the reporting, hit by a back-to-back tragedy that affected the country as a whole, there might be some deficiencies, or at least delayed implementation, especially during 2020 when the government was shut down. Unfortunately, the European Union didn't seem to care about that. All they cared about was designating us a non-cooperative jurisdiction, which they did in 2022 as a result of the reviews that were done in 2019 and 2020. The EU stated that the reason for our inclusion in the list is that there are concerns that the Bahamas, which has a zero or only nominal corporate income tax, it would be zero or not existent here, are attracting profits without real economic activity. In particular, we failed. Hold on. In particular, we failed to adequately address a number of recommendations of the OECD Forum on harmful tax practices in connection with the enforcement of economic substance requirements in practice. What this means is that you can have the law, and the law may be deemed compliant, but if you're not effectively enforcing the requirements under that law, then the review will find you as non-cooperative. We have endeavored to remedy these deficiencies that were identified. Mr. Vice President, we understand the adverse business implications for being designated as non-cooperative by the EU. This includes issues related to the reinsurance market, and specifically our insurance companies who have relations with European reinsurers. This is especially the case in Germany and in France. In these situations, there is a withholding on remittances to countries who are on the EU blacklist as a non-cooperative jurisdiction. This includes the Bahamas. What that means, Mr. Vice President, is when there is an insurance claim, I discussed this last time, that when the reinsurance company makes and satisfies the claim to the insurance company in the Bahamas, there is a withholding tax, meaning that the claim is not fully satisfied. We also understand the general adverse implications it has, being non-cooperative, on the correspondent banking cooperation with Bahamian licensees and the general market perception of the country. This is why we are determined to do what is necessary to address the deficiencies and be regarded as compliant and cooperative. There are identified deficiencies that lie in the reporting portal and the methodology that was put in place. As you might know, the former government put the substance reporting through the Department of Inland Revenue. That's where the framework lied. This method proved to be ineffective and presented many problems with the actual administration of the reporting. Our government solicited proposals for a separate substance reporting portal and platform that has been designed for the specific purpose to be achieved: reporting for economic substance under CESRA. Much like we see the industry doing with what's called the BOSS system, which is the reporting for beneficial ownership, which is actually done through the Office of the Attorney General. It is important that a purpose-built reporting platform to manage the economic substance reporting in a method that is recognized and approved by the EU and the OECD. Our government has retained the firm BDO to develop the reporting platform. BDO is the same firm that designed and manages the BOSS system that I just spoke about for beneficial ownership. Now, this should give the industry a sense of confidence in the economic substance reporting portal, because the BOSS portal has been rather effective for beneficial ownership reporting with very little complaints by the industry at large. I am pleased to announce that we are on pace for the launch of the portal in time for our re-rating by the EU later this year. It should be noted that the BDO Economic Substance Reporting Portal is being used in the region by the BVI and Barbados for their reporting without criticism by the EU or the OECD. We have been working hard with BDO on the reporting portal framework. We have had extensive consultation with industry on the framework of the reporting as well as the framework of the legislation. BDO has been working under a tight timeline to have the portal up and ready, as I said, for our next review. The new portal has been given a demonstration to the industry in a widespread and rather large, most of the industry was present in the consultation forum. We are now at the point where we have selected 9 registered agents to form the user acceptance testing team for the Bahamas economic substance portal. Now this we call it the UAT. UAT, the User Acceptance Testing Team, will be the team that is now goes into and has access to the portal and is able to test the portal and provide any feedback to the developers. These 9 registered agents are chosen based on them representing the most companies as well as in different industries. So these would reflect the high volume registered agents, the ones that have hundreds and hundreds and thousands of entities. We thought it important to get the high feedback from the high volume registered agents because they're the ones that will utilize the system most, and they're the ones that will be able to easily identify any deficiencies in the system that we would have to remedy before launching to the wider public. The current schedule is aiming to have the portal ready for testing starting August 14th. The team will start on August 8th as preparation week of training and demonstrations of the portal, and they will have access to the system on August 14th for the training. It is our goal to go live with the portal by September 8th, which would allow for industry to complete this year's filing in the new portal, as the filing deadline for economic substance is September 30th. We ask to the extent possible that all the registered agents who have not yet reported or have their clients report do so in the new portal. So we would be able to demonstrate to the European Union the effectiveness of the process and that we are utilizing a process that meets their standards. It is important that the jurisdiction demonstrate to the European Union reviewers that we have an effective compliance and enforcement regime to ensure that the industry is complying with the requirements of the legislation and mandate of the OECD. Allow me to give an update of the compliance activities under our economic substance regime. Officers of the legal unit of the competent authority, which is the Ministry of Finance, are conducting desk-based reviews of substance returns. Over 24,000 desk-based reviews have been completed to date. On-site inspections have been conducted. 34 on-site inspections have been completed to date in respect of 30 different entities. Of the 30 entities inspected, 13 have been deemed compliant, 16 have been directed to conduct an audit for further compliance monitoring. We wait these audit reports. And 1 entity has been deemed non-compliant and has been fined. An additional 30 entities have been identified for further review and on-site inspection. The inspection of these entities will commence once we pass this bill. Because as I will speak to, this bill sets out a modified framework of enforcement. And we would like to conduct those enforcement activities under the new legislation. So when we're reviewed, we can show the effectiveness of the bill in practice and in real time. The Commercial Entities Substance Requirements Bill 2023 has been redrafted and has largely been benchmarked against the BVI and the Cayman Islands. The reason for a new bill is threefold, Mr. Vice President. First, we have listened to industry. In our prior discussions with BFSB and AIBT, the industry representatives, and prior consultations with the industry, there was an overarching request to provide more clear guidance and definitions on what activities and scope of activities may be included and what may not be included. As you would see, we have provided extensive definitions in this bill to better give the necessary guidance on evaluating activities and determining if you are an included entity for the purposes of CESRA. Secondly, there was a need to bring the regulatory regime within accepted international standards to eliminate any outlier provisions. As you would see, we have removed the classification of passive holding entity. The Bahamas was an outlier with this classification. There was not one other country with this classification in their economic substance framework. And this was identified by the EU and something that they did not agree with in how we were administering our economic substance regime. So we have removed that classification from the bill. The third main objective of the repeal and replace of this bill is that given the new reporting portal, there are certain legislative and regulatory reforms required to be consistent with the BDO platform. BDO has recommended some legislative changes to ensure the effective launch of the portal. One of these reforms is now to require registered agents to report on behalf of the entities that they manage. For entities without a registered agent, they will provide the information to the Compliance Commission, who will act as the reporting agent to the competent authority. So they would just be a reporting agent, and those entities, which are mostly Companies Act entities who don't have registered agents, will report to the Compliance Commission. The Compliance Commission will upload a singular report covering all of those entities without a registered agent. This has been changed from the Registrar General, which was in the prior version of the bill. And that's one of the reasons we did a withdrawal here in this honorable place and over in that other place. Because after consultation with the Ministry of Finance, it was deemed that the Compliance Commission would be more appropriate, given that the Compliance Commission is in the business of compliance, and they fall under the purview of the Ministry of Finance. So they would only be a facilitator within the same competent authority of the reporting. It is important to note that at all times, regardless that the registered agent is the reporting party, that it is the entity itself, the client, that is tasked to provide accurate information to report. The use of the registered agent reporting and the Compliance Commission as a reporting agent is a change from the current regime. The current regime required the entities themselves, the clients, the IBCs, to be responsible for the reporting. However, it shouldn't be a shock to our registered agents, as in our beneficial ownership reporting under the BOSS system, the registered agents are mandated to report on behalf of their clients. And given that the economic substance reporting we're putting in place is put in place and being developed by the same persons, BDO, who did the BOSS system for beneficial ownership, the two systems will speak to each other. So in fact, the economic substance portal can pull all of the entity information out of the BOSS system as well as the registered agents to make sure the reporting as synchronized and easy as possible for the industry. We're making this change to have a more efficient reporting platform that accomplishes the requirements of the EU and the OECD. We're not charting new territory in this regard, as BVI and Barbados follow the same model. An important set of revisions in the bill has to do with enforcement. The EU and the OECD not only want to see that the legislation imposes a reporting component, but also that it provides an adequate framework for enforcement, and that we are actually undertaking the proper monitoring and reporting activities. Under Section 14, the competent authority has the power to compel the production of documentation to ensure that reporting is being done properly. The competent authority has the power to appoint an auditor under Section 14 and Section 15 at the expense of the entity. If the audit reveals any reporting offenses, the competent authority may impose fines. If the audit is not commenced, an automatic penalty of $50,000 will be imposed. So if you disregard the request for an audit. Audit deficiencies will result in a notice and a timeline not exceeding 30 days for rectification. With enforcement, there is also a penalty regime. Reporting penalties are distinguished between intentionally misleading actions concealment in reporting, and simply failing to report. Sections 19A and B versus Section 19C and F lay out these different penalty regimes. The highest likely penalty for failing to comply with the notice of deficiency is with respect to a formal audit. It is important to recognize that all year entities this year entities have been eligible to report. Because reporting is based upon within 9 months after the conclusion of your fiscal year. So depending on when your fiscal year ended, you have been able to report for most of the year. Now we know, based upon what we have seen, that most entities have not yet reported. Because, you know, like everybody, they wait to the last minute as well. We have incorporated a transition provision in the bill, however, for entities that have already reported. Because if they have already reported, they have complied with the obligations for the last fiscal year. In the new portal, we will integrate this transition provision where the registered agent will identify that the entity has already reported and provide proof, generally in the form of a receipt, that that reporting has actually occurred. In conjunction with the redraft of the legislation, we have also been working on guidance notes to better provide insight and detail on certain matters related to reporting and economic substance. These guidance notes are substantially complete, and we hope to release them for consultation by the end of August and have them in place by the time the portal goes live in September. Madam President, Mr. Vice President, I hope this update as to where we are has been helpful. We're working very hard to comply with the requirements that we must implement in a very short time frame. Given the prior reporting regime and the prior legislation, a complete overhaul was necessary in order to ensure that we have a compliant framework that operated properly. I want to thank the financial services industry for their patience and assure the insurance industry, who have registered their concerns, that we are working to give them a country where they can rely on certainty in their business. I want to thank the Ministry of Finance for their patience as we work through this. It is not an easy thing, and there is a lot of pressure when working through these tight timelines. Sometimes they have said bad things about me, and that's okay, Mike. That's okay. Because we're all trying to achieve the same thing. And anybody who's been in government knows when there are multiple agencies trying to work on the same thing, that sometimes poses even more difficulty. However, the Ministry of Finance has been working diligently, and I want to thank them for their patience and cooperations. I have confidence that they can see this through as the competent authority and operate their reporting and compliance obligations effectively. The only thing I ask for, Mike, is that the Ministry of Finance provide that the team has more capacity. It's a big job. We have a lot of entities. And we have to ensure that the tools and the resources are in place to ensure that they can actually perform the function that is being asked of them. And so we look for, I know, Mike, you've given them the assurance that you will backstop whatever is needed to ensure that we are compliant in this regard. And so, Mr. Vice President, I want to thank you, and I so move for the second reading of the Commercial Entities Substance Requirements Bill 2023.
Is there a seconder? The chair recognizes Senator the Honorable Darren Pickstock.
Chair recognizes Senator the Honorable Darren Pickstock.
Good afternoon, Madam President.
Come on, thank you. How are you?
Good afternoon, Senate colleagues. I stand to second I rise to second, the first reading and passage of these amendments to the Commercial Entities Substance Requirement Act, or CESRA, as it is known. I'd like to thank the Attorney General and the Minister of Economic Affairs, the Honorable Ryan Pender and Michael Alcides, who has painstakingly, from day one of the Davis administration, expressed this country's solemn and transparent commitment to meet the ever-moving goalposts of the European Union through the auspices of its various financial agencies, such as the OECD, in order to avoid the reputational damage to the financial services industry of our sovereign country, and to demonstrate to our former European colonizers that we are honest, accountable, transparent, reliable, and competent. Yet, Madam Vice President, it seems that European countries continue to move the goalpost, notwithstanding how former colonies such as the Bahamas are transparent in compliance and can show where we are always on track to insert or activate new and pending protocols. Madam President, I support these pieces of legislation, and I will also give my support, Madam President, to the diplomatic efforts of the Caribbean Action Financial Task Force, of which the Bahamas is a member and partner, to meet the European economic terms. Madam President, the European Union and the OECD is wreaking havoc on our financial services industry. Madam President, the international records will show that there are member states in Europe, in the European Union itself, who do not comply with the reporting requirements or the sharing of information that is placed on the Bahamas and former black government, former colonies of Europe. In several states of the United States of America, namely Nevada, Delaware, which is the Western world's biggest financial services center, the OECD and the European Union does not say diddly squat. The European Union issues no threat or blacklisting. The European Union and the OECD do not sit in Paris pontificating to Delaware and Nevada. As they say, under the tree playing dominoes, hog know where to rub their skin. To the ordinary patriotic Bahamians who will tell it like it is, how can we dismiss that Bahamian's commentary when he looks up at what is happening and he concludes it is economic racism? In other words, the ordinary man on the streets has summed it all up as the condescending opinion of an elitist in France that asks snobbishly, where the hell do we, as a former colony of Europe, get off wanting to run financial services centers and to have Europeans who are eager to be our clients? A new generation of Bahamians, and I would venture to suggest a new generation of Barbadians and Antiguans, have had enough. We are at the highest point of our patriotism, and in this year of our 50th anniversary of independence, we want to see independence fully expressed and delivered. So let the word go forth to friends and foe alike that we are resilient and ebullient and determined. We have weathered many storms, and still, here we stand. When the United States annexed Hawaii as its 51st state, and our once thriving pineapple industry was rooted out to give favor and priority to what most saw as an inferior fruit in Hawaii over that of Eleuthera's pineapple, the Bahamian people survived. When a suspicious international virus was used to wipe out our thriving sponge industry, the Bahamian people survived. When the insatiable appetite for drugs by Americans and Europeans turned our nation and its waterways into a killing field for narcotics trafficking, hoodwink and mislead our people into the nefarious business, pushed poison on our streets and into our children, and the powerful forces in the US and Europe blamed us and sought to do us serious reputational harm, yet we survived. Here we are at the dawn of the next 50 years, marching humbly to the centennial. We will not be denied, Madam President. Let me show you what I mean when I say that of the European imperialists are at work in this country. I challenge anyone, scholar, not to read any article in the media going back over the last 20 plus years and see if you do not detect the continuing thread or line which suggests that we, the Bahamian nation, we are doing something wrong. And the white man in Europe has caught us and only wants to bring us back to the safety of his plantation. Madam President, enough is enough. We have taken our concerns to the United Nations. We have offered reasons and rationale to the tinkering and insatiable folks in Paris. We have appealed to their consciousness and their conscience. We've asked them to remember that they owe us for centuries of pillage and looting and forced labor and the cruel and disconcerting caste system they try to use to divide and conquer our spirits. History tells us that the great Haitian emancipator discovered in Paris that sincerity and mutual respect for human rights and the rights of self-determination are not common to the colonizer. Yet, the same old tricks emerge, the same old scare tactics, terrorist funding my foot. But, they will find clever ways to push this line of uneasiness. Madam President, all over this nation, there are billboards erected to pay tribute to our founding fathers. These were the men and women who did the heavy lifting, Madam President. Their vision and their work and their courage transformed a sleeping fishing village into the third most successful economy outside of the United States and Canada. When, as young men and women, our founding fathers looked around at what the colonizers had mapped out for their lives, these courageous persons moved resolutely on all fronts to educate, to organize, and galvanize the people to speak with one voice. But then, very few had a college education. Very few finished primary school, much less high school. The highest ranked a black Bahamian could go on the police force was inspector. Most permanent secretaries and the secretary to the cabinet and secretary to the royal governor were imported from England, while the islands of the Bahamas began to sell vacations beyond the winter season to the world. Bahamians were not employed at the front office of BOAC in Nassau. Of course, they are now called British Airways. You could lawfully leave school at the age of 14, and school was not a glowing incentive that colonizing powers sold to our people. When the British left here in 1973 and we became an independent nation, they gave the Bahamas one parting gift, a paltry $250,000 to build the police college on Thompson Boulevard. Madam President, island luck pays you more than that for the Fantasy Five. After 314 years of colonization, we could not even get $250,000, Madam President. And so, Madam President, our bark is seaworthy. Our bark, Madam President, is seaworthy. We are made of some strong stuff. We are the inheritors of Pindling, Whitfield, Folks, Turnquest, Moores, Butlers, Simonets, Johnstones, Wilsons, the Rokers, the Adderley, the Doris Johnsons of the world, the Janet, the Ruby, the Hannah, the Dillard, the Maynards, the Lavardys, the Bowings, the Nottage, the Allens, the Isaacs, the Tommy, the Christie, the Ingram, the Whitney, Sweetbells, Poitier, Williams, and Robert Love. You can keep on pushing us. History will tell you that when we push back, we always remove the stumbling block. The quiet revolution. None will be allowed to disrespect our right to liberty, equality, and fraternity. The very words of the French Revolution. Madam President, I will support reluctantly because we have to show the world that the manner of our bearing. We must show the world that with each double stroke of the oppressor's whip on our back, we are unbending and prepared to work and engage. The day will come, Madam President. The day will come very soon when the world too will join us and say, enough.
I want to thank Senator the Honorable Darren Pickstock for his contribution. It has been moved and seconded that the following bill be read for a second time and committed. A bill for an act to provide for substantial economic presence and annual reporting of a commercial entity carrying on relevant activities and for connected purposes, to repeal the Commercial Entities Substance Requirements Act 2018 and for connected matters. As many, the chair recognizes Senator the Honorable Michael Barnett Ellis.
Thank you, Madam President. I first want to commend my Senate colleague, Mr. Darren Pickstock, for that very moving contribution just now. I also would like to commend my Senate colleagues, Darren Pickstock and Quinton Lightbourne, who represented the Senate chambers in a phenomenal way in the clergy versus parliamentarians, also called the pastors and the politicians game last night. If you watched the game last year, you will have noticed that there was a significant change in the parliamentarian team, and it was very obvious that they have been working hard over the last 365 days. So I look forward to next year's game, and I have hope. I have hope. Madam President, this weekend I had the privilege of visiting the beautiful island of Abaco to celebrate the freedom fighters of the Central and South Abaco F&M Association. Throughout our visit, the strength and resilience of Abaconians was palpable all around. Evidence of Dorian's destruction beside newly constructed buildings. The team name Abaco Survivors, that was their Bahamas Games name, was much, much, much more than a team name. It represents a people who will not be held back, a people who will rebuild and innovate each and every single time. And as we debate the amendments to the SESRA bill, I can't help but notice the parallels between our financial services industry and the resilience of Abaco. Like Abaco, the financial services industry has suffered from a hurricane known as blacklisting. The external pressures placed on our industry by various multinational organizations could have destroyed our robust financial services industry on several occasions. But our financial services industry has proven that it is a survivor. Yes. The Bahamas continues to lead the way by taking an innovative but measured approach to financial services. We have responded to and addressed the concerns when legitimate about our products and services. It is an industry which, for the most part, demonstrates what progress can be made when the government, that is the Ministry of Finance and the Office of the Attorney General, work together with the private sector to ensure that the industry has laws and policies to facilitate a thriving environment. To be honest, I'm not sure how they do it, but financial services professionals routinely participate and even draft legislation for the industry. The government does not ignore these drafts and create their own, but they respect the expertise of the professionals, and it is those industry drafted bills that are tabled, debated, and passed in this most honorable place. If only the professionals that deal with the protection of women and children could get that same level of respect. Amen. But there are promising reports that their concerns will be considered. The Commercial Entities Substance Requirements Act, or bill, sets out the requirements for an entity to be considered to have a substantial economic presence in the Bahamas. If any entity has a substantial economic presence in the Bahamas, then it will be considered resident in the Bahamas for tax purposes. The tug of war between government revenue and government expenditure is not just a Bahamian problem. Governments around the world are constantly looking to recover more government revenue to meet their growing expenditure needs. There is a global concern that entities are moving to the Bahamas to evade their tax obligations from higher tax jurisdictions. These higher tax jurisdictions, like Columbus, have come across the ocean looking for wealth and resources to take back home. Unfortunately, the Bahamas has an out-of-date reputation of being a lawless nation, or that we facilitate tax evasion. While our 700 islands and keys have used their God-given location to their economic advantage for nefarious reasons in the past, and pirates and blockade running and shipwrecks, they immediately come to mind, we have gone above and beyond in modern times, like many other Caribbean offshore jurisdictions, to demonstrate that we have a stable environment and trustworthy legal system. We provide products that the market demands, and we ought not to continue to be punished because a person or entity uses our products in bad faith to avoid tax obligations elsewhere in the world. SESRA was passed by the F&M administration to set out the threshold for determining whether an entity had a substantial economic presence in the Bahamas. It was an enormous undertaking, as every company, international business company, and partnership had to consider whether its income-generating activities are conducted in the Bahamas and report that information via an electronic portal. We are now 2 years post the initial iteration of SESRA, and there is a better idea of what works and what needs improvement. The new bill provides additional definitions that will provide more certainty when considering and applying the economic substance test. I have said over and over in this place that certainty is essential to any piece of legislation. Certainty in laws allows for parties to make decisions with confidence and to avoid unnecessary waste and expenditure on legal disputes, which may arise as a result of a lawyer's inability to predict a likely outcome. It has been argued that certainty is what attracts business people across the world to make use of our common law system and jurisdiction. It is therefore important that we continue to maintain a local legislative framework with certainty and clarity. I support the Commercial Entities Substance Requirement Bill 2023. Madam President, I would like to close by making a few comments on domestic violence and gender-based violence. Domestic violence is what happens at home and can be provoked and endured by any member of the family. Gender-based violence is violence which is caused against a woman just because she is a woman, both inside and outside of the home, at work, or in any environment of public life. Gender-based violence can include domestic violence, but domestic violence cannot cover gender-based violence. It is limited to violence that occurs in a domestic relationship. We like to comfort ourselves by saying that violence against women and children often occurs as a result of their relationships, and that the offenders are known to them. But just over this weekend, there was the report of a 9-year-old female child that was playing outside with friends when a man beckoned her to his car, and when she complied, he took her to an unknown location, threatened and sexually assaulted her. If that man was a stranger to her, she would not be entitled to the protections under the Protection Against Violence Bill, but she would have been entitled to the protections under the draft Gender-Based Violence Bill. This weekend's reports are heartbreaking. Every time I read these reports and hear these stories, I feel more vulnerable as a woman. I was telling the senators earlier that I've changed the way I work out. I no longer run by myself. I have become hyper aware of my surroundings. I become more and more scared that my beautiful 12-year-old daughter. I do not want to be a helicopter parent, but I must protect my daughter at all costs, because at any given moment, someone could kidnap her and rape her. We not only need laws that offer protection, but we need to come together and have a real conversation about why, as Drew says from the radio show Unfiltered, why we have a rapey culture. We are overdue for that conversation with ourselves. As I conclude, Madam President, I want to, through you, offer these words. To individuals and organizations working to prevent violence against women and girls that help survivors of violence, I pray that your courage and generosity will endure and that your voices will grow stronger. To persons that have behaved violently, that they will seek professional help to lead changed lives. And to victims of all forms of violence, that they will find safety and healing from their trauma, that they will rebuild their lives, and that they will never lose hope. Finally, Madam President, may the Lord God grant unto us an understanding heart and continue to bless the people of these 700 islands and keys.
Thank you, Senator Ellis, for your contribution. As many?
Madam President, just to move the bill and to thank all senators for their contributions. We have seen once again in this piece of legislation the bipartisanship, if I might call it that, whereby we, from the very beginning, when we began to confront these issues with global standards and blacklisting, et cetera, we've always adopted an approach where we sought to work together to ensure that we are complying with the international standards and that our jurisdiction continues to be seen as one that is compliant and an attractive place to do business. And so, Madam President, I move second reading in committal of a bill for an act to provide for substantial economic presence and annual reporting of a commercial entity carrying on relevant activities and for connected purposes, to repeal the Commercial Entities Substance Requirement Act 2018 and for connected purposes.
It has been moved and seconded that the following bill be read for a second time and committed. A bill for an act to provide for substantial economic presence and annual reporting of a commercial entity carrying on relevant activities and for connected purposes, to be repealed the Commercial Entities Substance Requirement Act 2018 and for connected matters. As many as in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say nay. The ayes have it. The motion is carried. Order that the bill be read for a second time and committed.
A bill for an act to provide for substantial economic presence and annual reporting of a commercial entity carrying on relevant activities and for connected purposes, to repeal the Commercial Entities Substance Requirements Act 2018 and for connected matters.
Further second reading of bills.
Yes, Madam President. Madam President, I rise to move for second reading and committal of a bill for an act to establish a parliamentary service for the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, to provide for a parliamentary service commission, its membership functions, procedures, and responsibilities, to provide for the transfer of public service officers to the parliamentary service and for the continuation of their service on the same terms and conditions, and for matters connected therewith or incidental thereto. Before I begin, Madam President, I would just like to echo the sentiments of my colleague, the Attorney General, as he moved the CESRA bill in recognizing the yeoman service of former Senator Tanya McCartney as Executive Director of the Bahamas Financial Services Board, and all of the work that she has done over her many years in that position in continuing to ensure that those lines of communication and collaboration between government and private sector remain open, and doing the very, very heavy lifting that went into, preserving our brand and actually rebranding the Bahamas financial services jurisdiction under the theme, the Bahamas, the clear choice. And you all know that in the business of financial services, it's what can be determined shark-infested waters, where you're constantly trying to develop new offerings so that you can attract new clientele, and at the same time, you're balancing, ensuring that you meet those ever-shifting global standards. As unfair as it might be, we have to make sure that we stay on the front line and on the cutting edge so that we don't fall behind. And so we thank Ms. McCartney for her service over the many years, and we wish her all the best in her new endeavors, and we are sure that she will bring the same level of competence and expertise and passion, diligence, and hard work to her new position, and we wish her all the best. And want to assure her that from time to time, when the need arises, we will be getting her on the phone to get her advice. Madam President, As we move to the Parliamentary Service Bill, we here in the Senate, we are now at the stage where we are trying to wrap up all of the legislation before we proceed to the summer recess. And, in having conversations with the clerk, Mr. Forbes, he says, what are we doing next? We're doing ABC. When are you doing parliamentary service? Well, we're going to do it. You're going to get it before the summer break, right? Yes, we'll get to it. Yes, yes, and we'll also be doing, when we get to the point of resolutions, we'll be doing the resolution for the IPU. And so, Madam President, it gives me great pleasure to move the second reading of the short-titled Parliamentary Service Bill. Madam President, in our system there are what we call three separate and co-equal branches of government. You have the executive, which consists of the cabinet, overseen by the prime minister, the judiciary, overseen by the chief justice, and which we know as our court system, and the legislature, which is our parliament and senate, overseen by the speaker and the president. Arguably, Madam President, the most important of these in terms of accountability to the public is the legislature. They report to the people and they're accountable to the people, versus the cabinet, who are mostly elected. In our system, you can have three unelected cabinet ministers serving from the Senate, but the cabinet ministers are mostly elected. But to serve in the cabinet, you are serving at the pleasure of the prime minister. The prime minister appoints you. Not to serve in the legislature, you are elected, of course, by the people. And in our system and in other parliamentary systems, those in the legislature but not in the cabinet, what we call the backbenchers, have traditionally played a very, very strong role, in addition to the opposition, in keeping the government's feet to the fire, so to speak, keeping the government accountable. So we can reflect on our system years ago where we had in those days, a smaller cabinet and a very, very strong backbench who, when they sought to keep the government accountable and question the government and make the government defend the policies that it was bringing forth, that was not seen as a sign of disloyalty, but as a sign of the function of those people, as those representatives, as representatives of the people in defending, the rights and the interests of the people who elected, who sent them there. And unfortunately, I think, Madam President, that has sort of gone away from our current system, our current dispensation, in that, sometimes even a question might be seen as a sign of disloyalty, and we know the attendant consequences that might follow through. But I wanted to say it's so important. The members of parliament are elected by the people, directly accountable to the people, and so the executive, the cabinet, might conceive a policy that they would translate into legislation, but they can't pass it by themselves. They need to bring it to the parliament, where it's debated by the people's representatives and then passed into legislation. And so the legislature, the parliament, the House of Assembly, the House of Assembly directly empowered by the people through their election. And so, having said that, Madam President, it is very, very important that the legislature is, number one, seen to be independent, and part of that independence is to ensure that they are given the financial wherewithal and the human resources that they require to fulfill their mandate. And here we come to the Parliamentary Service Bill. It is the intention of this Parliamentary Service Bill to ensure that the Parliament is seen to be independent and that they are given the resources to be able to perform their function. And in the Act, the bill that we are proposing here today, it says that the objectives of the Act is to establish a service to the Senate and the House of Assembly to enable them to perform their functions and duties and to exercise their powers under the Constitution. It goes on to speak about establishing an autonomous body, which I will speak about, the commission. And the third objective is to enable the Senate and the House of Assembly to generate revenue and to receive grants for use by the body referred to in paragraph B, which is the commission, and for the purpose of controlling and managing the parliamentary service, to promote accountability and transparency of parliamentary service, and to promote education, technology, and citizen participation in the democratic process of the Senate and the House of Assembly. And I believe that's the crux of the matter, Madam President, to make sure that our citizens know what we're doing, they understand what we're doing, and that we use all technology available to us to get that information out to the public. And so this bill establishes a parliamentary service which shall consist of the clerk and the officers and the staff, and it lists the functions of the parliamentary service. It also establishes a parliamentary commission which oversees the parliamentary service. So there is, instead of being governed strictly by the public service, there will be a parliamentary commission that will be responsible for the operations of the Houses of Parliament, inclusive of the human resource function. I want to just say briefly, Madam President, when it comes to the commission, the objective of what we're doing here today, when we establish the commission, is to promote the independence of the legislative branch, and as well to empower them, give them the resources that they require so that they can do their job properly, Madam President. When I move on, we'll speak about the need for new premises, etc. But there is a need for example, members of Parliament to be supported in terms of the ability to conduct research, to have access to various databases, so that when they are addressing issues as they come up, they may do so in a way that gives accurate information to those who are receiving, who are watching and listening. I wanted to point out, Madam President, when we look at section 14 of the bill, it speaks to the composition of the parliamentary commission, Madam President, and the Parliamentary Service Commission. And I wanted to point out, I'll just go through the composition of the commission to give an idea, and I think it's commendable that in this whole spirit of independence and collaboration and working together, it says there shall be a commission. Recall now, the commission will oversee the parliamentary service. It says the commission shall comprise the Speaker of the House of Assembly as chair, the President of the Senate, the Deputy Speaker, the Minister of Finance or a member of the Cabinet appointed by the Prime Minister, the Leader of Government Business in the House of Assembly, the Leader of the Opposition or a member of the Opposition appointed by the Leader of the Opposition, the Leader of Government Business in the Senate, the Leader of Opposition Business in the Senate, 2 members of the House of Assembly nominated by government, 1 member of the House of Assembly nominated by the opposition, 1 senator nominated by the government, 1 senator nominated by the opposition, and the clerk. So you see, Madam President, there's representation from the parliamentary staff as well as from the executive and, of course, the governing side and the opposition side. I think that's very, very important to promote the ideals of what we're speaking about, independence and accountability. Of course, the bill speaks to the appointment of the clerk, or the clerk, as they say in the UK, and what the qualifications are: 10 years experience in parliamentary procedure, or someone who is a counsel and attorney under the Legal Profession Act. The other thing I wanted to point to, Madam President, in the bill was, as we go to section 24, the funds of the Commission and Parliamentary Service. And so the funds of the Commission and the Parliamentary Service shall consist of any money that is appropriated through the budget process to the Commission by Parliament, any money that may be paid to the Commission and the Parliamentary Service by way of grants or donations, and importantly, Madam President, funds that might be raised through the provision of services. And I'm thinking things like perhaps broadcast rights and those sorts of things, publications, etc., or any funds that might vest in or accrue to the Commission and the Parliamentary Service. So it empowers the Parliamentary Commission and the Parliamentary Service to actually raise revenue. And I think that's important, Madam President, because we talk about all of the needs. Now it encourages the Commission and the Service to be creative and find ways to generate revenue. Also, we're talking about raising revenue and having money appropriated to it, Madam President. The bill speaks about the need for the requirement to have audits and annual reports in a timely manner. Amongst the general provisions, Madam President, I'm very happy to see some very hard timelines in terms of the provision of the Hansard and provision of hard copies and electronic copies of debate, because sometimes that has been a challenge in terms of when members want to have hard copies of the Hansard, either so they can reference it in their debate or defend themselves. I see here we're requiring some hard timelines, for example, within 6 days. So within the electronic recording and publication of debates digitally within 2 hours of suspension. So 2 hours later you can have the digital copy, and then direct the delivery within 6 days of the debate proceeding or meeting, legible, hard, and digital copies of the edited transcript. So within 6 days, and that's 6 days maximum, edited hard copies of the Hansard. The bill provides for the transition of employees of the Senate and the House to the Parliamentary Service from the public service. Should they decide to transition, they should suffer no loss of either tenure or benefits in terms of salary or any accumulated benefits. That should be protected. And for those who wish to not transfer to the Parliamentary Service, then they will be deployed elsewhere in the public service, again, with no disadvantage in terms of tenure and salary. So, Madam President, I believe that what we are proposing here would lead to more efficient, transparent operation of our Parliament. It will allow us to offer better service to the public, remembering that the main function of the legislature is to be accountable to the people who elected them. And of course, Madam President, we look forward someday to new parliamentary facilities again, not so that we can have fancy offices and digs for ourselves, but so that we might better be able to undertake our primary responsibility, which is to be able to do the business of the people who elected those in that other place, and by extension allow us to sit here. We can do their business effectively and give them top quality service. And when they need to come to the House or the Senate, they can be accommodated in comfort, and they can access our facilities with ease and in comfort, and they can, if they want to come in person, sit and watch their business being done. But moreover, Madam President, I think it provides an excellent framework and foundation for us to continue to build on our parliamentary service. I want to take this opportunity to recognize and say thank you to Mr. Forbes and all his staff who under very, I don't know how they do it sometimes, but under very challenging circumstances, made sure that we have what we need to do the business that we have come here to do, and we thank them for that, and we look forward to ensuring that they have, the resources so that we are even better equipped, so that when we stand to debate, we have at our fingertips all the information we need, the technology, all the means to get to the people. I'm very happy to see that proceedings are online, live, and then coming out shortly after debate. So it's important for our students who are studying abroad and our Bahamians living in the diaspora to be able to, pull up and listen to some of what we have to say. And we just look forward as we move to add to that and really improve the offering that we have. So, Madam President, I want to just once again thank Mr. Forbes. I know that the former Speaker of the House of Assembly was a vociferous and advocate for independence of the legislature. I mean, that was his. Yes, Hanson Mutri. That was his. He would push that constantly. That was his issue, and we find it. We think that this again, Madam President, is a step in the further development of our parliamentary service, and by extension, further development of our country. And 50th anniversary of independence is a wonderful time to take this next step in the deepening of our parliamentary democracy. So I so move, Madam President.
Good. Thank you, sir.
Thank you for your contribution, Senator Honorable Michael Halkitis. Is there a seconder? The chair recognizes Senator the Honorable Darren Henfield.
I believe that, in fact, what we do here today serves to deepen democracy and makes us a more mature nation and people. Yes, sir. And against that backdrop, I stand to second this bill before us. Before I do so, permit me also to add words of approbation, as indicated by the Attorney General and Minister Halkitis just then, about the services of one Tanya McCartney, who has served successive administrations in the role which she held at the Financial Services Board, and had done so with complete excellence, straight through. A pure nationalist, a financial professional, very adept in her field of practice, and we're very proud of her. Also, permit me to extend to my wife's adopted sisters condolences on the passing of their mother yesterday, Frida Quant. She died quietly at home early yesterday morning. When my wife came here to attend high school, she took her in as her own. She's a mother to us. She was a mother to us, and she'll be sorely missed by all of us. So, Madam President, as I second the bill before us, I will also speak a little to the resolution for the Inter-Parliamentary Union. I think we had determined that we would do these as somewhat of a compendium. And so, Madam President, philosophers like Montesquieu have long held that when legislative and executive powers are in the hands of the same body of officials, there can be no true freedom and protection of the people that laws are intended to protect. So the judiciary, legislative, and executive branches of government must operate separately in order for there to be balance in the system. It's worth noting also, you should note this, that the Parliament is actually the one the Constitution first refers to, and the executive and the judiciary, they follow. And so historically, as I try to put things into context, I want to share some of the history of our Parliament, from where we came and from whence we've come, as they say, and where we are today on this momentous occasion. It is against that backdrop that I rise to second this historical bill and progressive resolution, which we pray will serve to create a more independent, more efficient, more fair, more accountable, and more transparent Parliament in the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. But before I continue, permit me, like the Minister did before me, to also thank our clerk, Mr. David Forbes, and staff of our Parliament for the service and guidance they so ably provide for us who are privileged to serve in these hallowed halls. Yours is not an easy task, yet you effortlessly guide us through sittings with the utmost professionalism, confidence, and grace befitting your office. And for that, we thank you. Madam President, the bill and resolution before us today, which I believe complement each other, but also serve to deepen and strengthen and enhance the administration of our parliamentary democracy by empowering the legislative branch of our government with the autonomy envisioned by the Constitution. We, in His Majesty's loyal opposition, will always support any effort toward further solidifying and deepening the democratic process in our country. And as such, I'm honored to second this historical effort. The intent of the Parliamentary Service Bill of 2023 is to deliberately establish an independent service outside of the public service or any other constitutionally mandated service to enable members of the Senate and the House of Assembly to perform their functions and duties and to exercise their powers as delineated in Chapter 5 of the Constitution. Simply put, this bill aims to justifiably separate the legislature from the control of the public service and the executives as Parliament seeks to enhance its constitutionally ordained obligation. Madam President, as we are aware, ours is a bicameral legislature, which means that it is made up of two main chambers. That said, our system of government is established upon the Westminster system of parliamentary democracy. For some reason, however, we have not in recent times adhered, as we ought, to the doctrine and strictures of the separation of powers by ignoring the legal right of Parliament to govern its own affairs. Madam President, a parliamentary democracy is described as a form of government in which the party with the majority in the Parliament or the legislature forms the government. As seen in our case, the leader of the party which commands that majority becomes the Prime Minister. Executive functions are exercised by members of the Parliament appointed by the Prime Minister to the Cabinet. Also, as manifested here, those in the minority serve in opposition to the majority and have the duty to challenge it regularly. When the minority properly and effectively challenges the majority within the four corners of the rules, the country and the people benefit. This is simply the nature of our democratic parliamentary philosophy. The book of Proverbs in chapter 27 teaches us that iron sharpens iron, so one person sharpens another. Madam President, as we know, the Parliament of the Bahamas is 294 years old, having been established on the 29th of September, 1729. There seems to have been, through nearly 300 years, however, an erosion of the powers of the legislative branch, as the executive branch, which has existed for merely 59 years, simply grew stronger and stronger. Madam President, history teaches us, then, that today marks a tremendous milestone in the evolution of the country's parliament, which found its origins in the royal grant of the Bahamas to the Lords Proprietors of the province of Carolina in 1670, and a more detailed commission and set of instructions for the Lords Proprietors in 1671. All early requests for an assembly, however, fell on deaf ears, as the Bahamas continued to be ruled by the Governor's Council for another 50 years, up until Governor Woodes Rogers set up the rule of the Governor in Council by establishing an assembly in 1729. The first meeting of the assembly, which comprised 24 elected, 8 from Nassau and 16 others, was held in Samuel Lawford's house. The assembly was said to have passed 12 important pieces of legislation the first 2 weeks of its sittings. So, Madam President, the doctrine of the separation of powers, as espoused by Montesquieu in the mid-18th century, represents the bedrock of the values of democracy. The doctrine of separation of powers necessitates that the key institutions of state, executive, legislature, and judiciary, be clearly divided so as to ensure that the rights and freedoms of citizens are protected from the tyranny that might repose in the hands of one who wields absolute power. That is why we make this effort today. Madam President, today we also approve a resolution for the Bahamas to become a member of the Inter-Parliamentary Union. This is an international organization of national parliaments whose primary objective is the promotion of democratic governance, accountability, and cooperation amongst its members. The body also seeks to advance gender parity among legislatures. It encourages youth participation in politics and the sustainable development goals. In short, the IPU provides an opportunity for positive democratic dialogue and growth through the incorporation of a multiplicity of resources and experiences available to its member states. Madam President, with that, I second the bill and resolution now before us, and I thank you.
Thank you, Senator. The Honorable Darren Henfield. It has been moved and seconded that the following bill be read a second time and committed. A bill for an act to establish a parliamentary service for the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, to provide for a parliamentary service commission, its membership, functions, procedures, and responsibilities, to provide for the transfer of public service officers to the parliamentary service and for the continuation of their service on the same terms and conditions, and for matters connected therewith or incidental thereto. As many are in favor, as many? No, 1 second again. Is it? As many as in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say nay. The ayes have it. The motion is carried. Order that the bill be read for a second time and committed.
A bill for an act to establish a parliamentary service for the Commonwealth of Bahamas, to provide for a parliamentary service commission, its membership, functions, procedures, and responsibilities, to provide for the transfer of public service officers to the parliamentary service, and for the continuation of their service on the same terms and conditions, and for matters connected therewith or incidental thereto.
Further second readings?
Madam President, I move that the business of the Senate be now suspended until Wednesday, the 2nd of July, 2023. I'm sorry.
2nd of August.
Looking right at it. The 2nd of August, 2023, at 10 a.m.
Is there a seconder? It has been moved and seconded that the business of the House stand suspended until the 2nd of August, 2023. As many as in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say nay. The ayes have it. The motion is carried. The ayes have it. The Senate stands adjourned, suspended until the 2nd of August, 2023 at 10 a.m.